Alright, so we're in Unit 1, Lesson 1A. This is the second part of this. We're going to go through this real fast because this is stuff that you should definitely already know. We're going to evaluate fractions. Talk about using the TI-83 to help us out with that, as well as using TI-83 to do square and cube roots. And then also we're going to find some absolute values. The warm-up simply talks about what we talked about in Part 1. Fractions. When typing your fraction in the calculator, you must use parentheses. Especially when we're talking about multiplication or division. So I'm just going to do one problem in each of these. And then when we're in class and you guys have the calculator, you're going to do a couple more of them. So anyway, if I have 4/3 times 2/5, it's very important that I multiply using parentheses. And so that when I hit 4/3 times 2/5, you can see that I get a decimal. 0.53 repeated on a 3. Your calculator will do fractions. You can just hit math enter and then hit enter, and you get your answer of 8/15. Okay. Now, and we'll talk about how to change this from a mixed to an improper. Actually, I'll go ahead and show you that now. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 7 is 11. So this problem is 4/9 times 11 halves. Just make sure you know how to switch those around. When you divide fractions, it's the same thing. You evaluate the numerator, then the denominator, and then you divide. So no matter what you're doing, you're gonna, make sure that you look at the top and look at the bottom and then divide. You may not even have to divide a particular fraction in that case. Just as a practice, and we'll go into this in more detail in class, you put these two together, you get -6. You put these two together, you get -3. So then when we check -6 divided by -3, it's a +2. Okay. So that went over multiplication and division of fractions. Absolute value. Absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. So absolute value is always positive. Now there is one exception to this. So when I'm looking at this one, the absolute value of -4 is 4. Absolute value of 2.7 is 2.7. The absolute value of 2/3 is 2/3, except the fact that the negative sign is outside of the parentheses. So this means that that answer is negative. So if the minus sign is outside the parentheses, the answer will be negative. Okay? But no matter what number is inside the absolute value, that answer is positive. Only time you can have a negative answer is if you have a negative sign outside the parentheses or absolute value number. Using your TI-83 for help. So you're going to click Math, and you're going to click the right arrow. And then you're going to click Enter or 1. You type in the number or expression. And then you close the parentheses. And then you hit Enter. So, if I'm going to do the example number 1 over here, and again, you can have the calculator tomorrow when you get in class to look at this. I'm going to do 15 minus math, right arrow, enter. 10 minus 4, close the parentheses, and hit enter. And I get 9. We knew that anyway because 10 minus 4 is 6. But if it had been a negative 6, it still would have been 6. And so the answer still would have been 9. Yeah. So we'll talk about that more in class. Quickly moving on, we talked about fractions, we talked about absolute values. Let's talk about squares and square roots. 8 squared is 64. Negative 8 squared is also 64. And the square root of 64 is 8. So the principle is that if both are positive, it's positive. If they're both negative, it's positive. And so there's always going to be a positive answer. Okay? Now, when we do the square root, you cannot find the square root of a negative number. And that's because even if it's unreal, and when you get in Algebra 2, you'll learn that more. But because when I square a negative, I get a positive answer. And so there's no way to undo a negative square root that's going to give you a positive answer. And so since it's kind of related to area, it kind of makes it difficult to make those happen. We will practice square roots and squares more in class tomorrow. Similar is the cube root. 2 cubed is 8. Negative 2 cubed, however, is negative 8. So the cube root of 8 is 2. The major difference is that the cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. You can find the cube root of a negative number. And it relates to what we found up here, is that when we multiply something 3 times itself, it allows it to come back to that negative side. The answer is real. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. Tomorrow in class, I'm going to show you how to find the square root and the cube root using the calculator, and then we'll practice these. Okay? So we're going to stop that video right here so that since you don't have a calculator at home, so we'll bring the calculator in and we'll work on squares and cube roots tomorrow in class. And I'll give you plenty of time to practice.